There we go. Okay, mic is on. Cool. Yeah, I think I'm good. I think I'm good. Hello, everyone. Live and VOD viewers. It's been a while since I've done this. Been a hot minute since I've done any writing streaming. First time back after like a week and a half off. Well, first time back doing the writing. I've streamed a couple times. Some of you might have seen me this morning. Which was I don't know if I'll ever go back and watch that, to be perfectly honest. I don't know if I'll watch any of those morning ones. People were on and seemed to be amused by it, but I was not aware of most of what was going on. That's why I get up so early. It takes me a minute to get the engine revving. But we're here writing today. I don't know, this might get awkward. I had a notice of entry on my apartment door saying that people had to come in and put the finishing touches on the remodels they did in my apartment, and that they would be in here any day from today till Friday, anytime from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Like, maybe a text beforehand or something, but nope, none of that. So there might just be a maintenance guy walking in the background. That's my front door right back there, so I don't know if someone walks into my apartment and just yell at me, I guess. I don't know. I'll probably hear it. These aren't really noise-canceling headphones, but so I don't know. Things might get interesting. But at any rate, we are here. We're here. And I'm going to get back to the project we've been working on, the project that we started not long ago, which is an entirely new campaign that we're working on. We have ourselves a pretty cool map. Coming back and looking at it, I'm not displeased with the way this map came out. A lot of times, you know how it goes. A lot of times where it's like you make something and in the moment you're like, yeah, that looks good, and then you come back to it and you're like, no, it does not look good. I'm not getting that this time. I'm feeling like this looks pretty okay. I'm pretty content with how this all kind of panned out. So, with that in mind, I suppose we just kind of keep plugging away at it, don't we? That's kind of what the process is. Like I kind of said at the outset of this project, the whole point of it was to sort of document the entire writing process of the way I go about making my homebrew campaigns and stuff like that, because people have shown interest in me providing stuff. So eventually, if I can get my crap together and provide this campaign that we're making for people to use of their own accord, and then it's like, hey, we have the writing process that went with it, like, fully documented. So if people ever have questions about how something came to be, they can come back and see the process. But I suppose if we're going to do that, I got to actually, like, write and do the process here. So we have our map, which does look pretty good. Which does look really good. I really am pleased with this. I love this tool. This Wonder Draft tool that I'm using. I think it creates some pretty solid maps that are quite stylistically pleasing. I really like the look of them. I really like what this ends up making. Yeah, and we're going to be filling this out. We're going to be putting in a whole lot of other stuff in here, but it's all kind of that's something that kind of goes along, like we make progress on that as we're writing the rest of the stuff, is usually what ends up being how I end up doing it. Like, sometimes I'll get it in my head that I want to try things other ways, but it rarely sticks whenever I try that, and I kind of fall back to using my stuff here to do that. So yeah, so we've got that's right, Novotroykladny. Novotroykladny is the name of the main, like, village that is going to be in this region, and that's what our village right here is. And then this is the forward base. So the concept of this area here, we can kind of recap this, and I'm doing this as much for my benefit because it's been a minute since I've worked on this. It's been like almost 2 weeks since the last time I worked on this was, based on just how the timing of everything worked out for my vacations and stuff. But the concept for this one is we have in our world overview, if you go up in here this direction, there is one of the like major cities, the city of Phosphik, within my world, and that's like because I've got my world that's sort of like a post-calamity world, so that everything's really dangerous except for a few guarded cities, but things are slowly starting to recover, both naturally and through the efforts of the sentient races, the enlightened races within the world. And so we have Phosphik up there, which is sort of the established safe city, and they're working on here. I bet you I can open this up here real quick and easy. Come on, baby. Come on, baby. There we go. So here's our world map, and we're working in this area right here. So we can zoom in a little bit here. Yeah. So here's our world right here. This is the region that we're working in, just south of the Siski Forest here. And so Phosphik is up here, and we have the established safe route that kind of comes over from Phosphik, goes to Yusnoi, and kind of curves down around here to catch a lot of cities. And within the lore of the world, it's like that was an easier, safe route to establish than this. Even though they would want to be able to trade with more places, it was easier to go through the forest because there was already an established highway that would go through there, and so it was easier to create that highway, and it was a shorter distance than trying to save any sort of highway going through the Goldenwind Plains. But as things are recovering and as people are trying to rebuild the world post unhinging, they are now trying to establish a trade route that goes down to Mofafetting, just a direct one there to cut off, days worth of travel, by not having to go this wide loopy round there. And so the region that we're working on right in here is kind of right in the thick of it, and that's where this pathway here, this is our road, and we have the forward base, and that's sort of, so these are the two sort of populated areas. We have the city that's been established to sort of be able to trade back and forth with Phosphik and get supplies as needed for sort of this forward base that's trying to sort of like carve out and establish a safe pathway, because while the monsters can move within the world, avoiding their lairs and monstrous hotspots, and avoiding swear to God, I thought I heard a knock back there. I want to be super paranoid all day because there's totally going to be maintenance people busting in. It's going to happen. It's going to happen either right now or it's going to happen. Hey, Revelator, thanks for the follow. I appreciate that. Happy to have you here. As I was saying, there's people supposed to do maintenance on my apartment sometime in the next 3 days. No more detail than that. And so they're going to bust in either while I'm streaming or tomorrow when I've got 3 back-to-back meetings for work. All of them video conferences. That's what's going to happen. So I'm sitting here like paranoid about all that crap. But at any rate, where was I? So talking about sort of this world and sort of recapping, trying to catch myself back up because it's been a couple weeks since I worked on this. But yeah, so like they're trying to establish this pathway that like kind of weaves in between different tears within planar realities and everything like that can, for obvious reasons, be pretty dangerous within a D&D world. And so that's sort of the story of what's going on here. And so I'm thinking what I want to think about is just sort of work on filling in some of these generalized bits of information that I like to have in place for for any given homebrew campaign that I'm doing. Hold on. No, it's not the maintenance people. It's the neighbor kids talking on the landing. That's the noises that I'm hearing outside. I'm gonna be so paranoid. I'm gonna be so paranoid all day. It's gonna happen. But yeah, I kind of want to start working on those things and start thinking about maybe outlining some missions, because I know that sort of the overarching mission that I want to establish or I want to have for this region is I think it would be good to incorporate somehow or another this forward base needs assistance, right? There's some sort of obstacle like blocking more forward progression. and so it's going to require some work from players to handle that. That's definitely going to be one of the missions. I mean, I always kind of have a handful of, I always have at least 10 missions of varying depth and intensity going on in a region. So one of the big ones is going to be that. I'm definitely going to incorporate something in the mountains, and definitely something within the forest as well. Never played a game of D&D. Any recommendations? Oh, an infinite number of recommendations. I mean, if you're looking at playing, so here's what I always recommend. There are, if you don't have anyone to play with in real life, there are tons and tons of different communities online that you can try and break into to find a game if you're interested in playing. But really what I would recommend is find a group of friends that you just hang out with in real life and would be interested in giving it a shot. Because I always find that ends up being the best way to have a cohesive group, is if you're just friends goofing around. You know, that can make it harder to have always like a serious, consistent group sometimes. But I find whenever you hear stories of like groups with a lot of friction, it's usually when it's a group of strangers meeting online trying to make a campaign work, and they all just sort of have different. They just have different personalities and different things that they're trying to achieve with a game. Not to say that it can't work out, but I find that usually when you hear like horror stories, it kind of comes from that environment. Whereas if it's just a group of friends, they tend to be it tends to be much more cohesive, and the game just sort of naturally takes on whatever atmosphere best fits you and your friends that way. Oh, I see what you're saying. So you don't have any stories or a DM. That can be a tough one. If none of you knows how to DM, that can be a tough one. One thing that can work really well is if you guys are already sort of present and aware of how D&D Beyond works, they have all of the campaigns. In fact, I actually kind of have it pulled up here, and so you would have to pay for it. But they have all these adventures here, these pre-made adventures. They can be really handy. And one of the best ones, where is it here? Hold on, let me find. I forget what it's called. Once I see it, I'll remember it. Right here, this one right here, The Lost Mind of Phandelver. Hey John. Yeah, no problem, man. Even just lurking, I appreciate that you're here. Glad to see you here. But Lost Mind of Phandelver is a really good one for beginners. It's part of the beginner's kit. It's designed to be good for beginners. It walks through a lot of the basics, and it can be a good one. Hey there, Chow Mein, how's it going? It can be a good one for a group of guys, guys or gals, just trying to figure stuff out. The video won't play. Uh-oh. That's not right. That's not how it's supposed to be. Hold on. I suppose I should probably troubleshoot that if that's an issue, right? Is anyone else having that issue? Oh boy. This is going to be a nightmare if I have to try and figure that out. Hold on a second. Let me see something here. Just bring this off to the side here. Okay, it's fine for Revelator. Okay. Sounds like it's a Chow Mein issue, personally. I don't know. I don't know. Okay, well, I'm gonna leave it alone. I'm not gonna screw with too much stuff. If it seems to be working. Oh, you're at the airport. That's why. Jeez, you give me a heart attack here, making me think that I've got some sort of technological issues going on here. It's you. It was you all along. But yeah, Revelator. That's probably what I would recommend, is find one of the pre-made campaigns from Wizards, because I find they do a pretty good job of sort of walking you through a lot of that stuff. It's also a really good idea to make sure that you have the player's handbook. If one of you is trying to learn how to be a DM, okay, good. Glad it's working for you now. If one of you is trying to learn how to be a DM, it can be helpful to have the monster manual and the DM guide, but I honestly don't even think those are necessary. I think having the player's handbook, yeah, Chow Mein. Revelator was asking for some tips about a group of people who have never played D&D but are trying to break into it. And so, yeah, it's definitely a challenge if no one already knows how to DM. But that should not, I would say definitely don't let that hold you back. I would say all of you guys get, a hand on the same module. Well, not all of you guys get the hand on the same module. Whoever's willing to DM get their hands on the same module, and all of you get your hands on the player's handbook, and start kind of looking through it, and just stumble your way through it. Honestly, like really, just goof off and fumble your way through it. Yeah, exactly. That's the one I was bringing up. John is Mines of Phandelver. It's a really good one. It's made for beginners. It's 100% supposed to be. It's not super complicated. It's basically a series of dungeons that you can go through and kind of learn the stuff. What do you got for us, Daggerfriend? I can't believe I had to leave. Yeah, it's D&D is such a fun game. It's such a fun game. I'm part of 2 campaigns. I DM both campaigns. I'm a forever DM. See, that's the one thing you got to be careful of, Revelators, is as soon as one of you takes the reins of being DM and demonstrates a willingness and capability of being DM, that will be the only thing you do for the rest of forever. Because DMs are so few and far between that once word's out that you're a you're a DM, that's what everyone does. And like that's how I find my games, is it usually ends up being friends of friends that are like, hey, one friend A said that you're a DM, and so we're looking for someone to teach us how to play. It's like, okay, all right, I'll be the DM. And so that's kind of how it goes. But yeah, I guess the upshot of all of it is get your hands on a module. Lost Mines of Phandelver is a really, really good one for that. Get your hands on a player's handbook. Have all of you guys take the time to kind of look through the player's handbook and learn the basics, and then just struggle through it. Just goof off and struggle through it. Make mistakes together, all of you guys. If you're a group of friends that are already there and kind of have a rapport with each other, no one's going to be particularly upset when anyone gets anything wrong, because all of you guys are just like struggling through and trying to figure it out together. And that's like the best way to learn. I mean, even having played D&D for the better part of a decade, being a DM most of the time, I'm still constantly getting things wrong. But because I play with friends, no one gives a damn, and it's really funny. And a lot of times it leads to good hijinks. I prefer LARPing. That's an entirely different beast, but like LARPing is awesome too. LARPing is its own bundle of joy for sure. Yes, John. A session 0 is a really good thing. So what that means is you have a session where you're not actually playing the game. You're all getting together, discussing building your characters together, discussing expectations and what you want the game to feel like. Do you want it to have a lot of role play? Do you want it to just be battle mechanic heavy? Is it all dungeon crawls? Do you want political intrigue, stuff like that? And just like talking about your characters, making sure you all kind of have your characters built, understand what your character's abilities are, and work through it together, because different people will notice different things as you're going through. So that's an incredibly valuable thing. And it's a really hard one a lot of times to convince new players to do. Because you're not playing, you're just so itchy and anxious to start playing. Wrote characters in secret. So here's what I would say, Revelator. Keep secret the the backstory and stuff like that, but the mechanics and how your characters are built, share that with each other, because you're gonna learn exactly what skills and stuff your characters have very quickly anyway when you're playing the game and it comes time for one of you to do an attack or something like that. So work together and make sure you have cohesive, because the last thing that you guys want is for you guys to have like 7 brooding secretive rogues or whatever. Like, you don't want to have all of the same character. So it really is important to have that session 0 where you discuss your characters, but if you want there to be sort of role-playing intrigue, then work on the mechanics together and build your characters together that way, but then keep your backstory secret, right? That's a perfectly valid thing, and that's what I do with a lot of my groups. I say your backstory you don't need to share, other than just like a basic yeah, I'm a pirate from this, that, or the other place, or like I come from a monastery and you guys met me in the city, and like stuff like that. That stuff is like basic information to each other. Keep the details separate or secret. That's fine. But let's see here. and rogue. Okay, so if you guys know that you have different characters, that's good. Still, 100% have a session 0. I cannot stress that enough. Have a session 0. Talk about what campaign you're going through. Talk about who's going to be the DM. Because the fact is, if you guys have all made characters, if one of you is going to be a DM, it's going to be a bad idea for them to also have a character. Because that character is not going to be on a level playing field, because they're going to know what's going on in the module. So have those. Oh, thank you for the follow, Daggerfear. I appreciate that. Appreciate you. But yeah, like I cannot stress enough. Like you need to have that. You need to have that. You can finish off session 0 with starting to play, by all means. But make sure you guys all sit down and you talk about what campaign are we playing? What are my characters' mechanics? What are their gameplay strengths and weaknesses? Do we have a balanced set of skills within our party? Otherwise, things are going to be difficult and you're going to run into rules, standstills, and stuff like that. And also, because none of you guys have been DMs and none of you have played before, talk about, you know, what you figured out and kind of what you saw in the player's handbook and stuff like that. You know, figure that stuff out. Take a second, even if it's 20 minutes before you start playing. Have that session 0. Talk about things before you start playing. Otherwise, you're going to be all sitting there and like with different expectations and stuff like that. Like different people might have different expectations for how much role playing you're going to do and stuff like that. Some people might find it really uncomfortable to have like a whole lot of I don't care that the drivers are available. Get out of here. Stupid computer. Think it wants me to think I want to know what's going on with my computer. Sorry, distracted. But yeah, it's going to be really important. It's going to be really important to do that. But I guess that's pretty much the upshot, you know. Find a campaign, get the handbook, the rule book, keep those close by while you're playing. It's very helpful to have multiple copies of the player's handbook when you're playing too, so that way you're not constantly all passing it around trying to figure out what pages to be on and stuff like that. Also, for a lot of new players too, you know, don't be afraid necessarily to go for magic users, but if you're going to be a magic user, take the time to really read those rules because they get complicated fast. Just, you know, fair warning, fair warning. You can be a magic user that's not like a sorcerer, wizard, or warlock or whatever. But those ones that are like 100% about using spells, they get complicated fast. So just be ready. Be ready for that. But yeah, no, yeah. Hopefully that gives you some stuff to think about, Revelator, as you're moving forward, or anyone else who's watching or like watching live or watching the VODs and looking for advice on getting started on D&D. But yeah, like I mean, I guess really the most important thing. You guys will, Revelator. You absolutely will. The most important thing is it's like with anything ever in the world. You're going to suck up at it at first. Like there's no way to get around that. You're gonna suck at it, and that's fine because you've got a group of friends and you're all gonna suck at it together. And there's gonna be all these hilarious like hijinks that only you guys will understand. It'll be a great time for you guys to get together, have fun, bond a little bit. It's a great time. It's a great time. It's no different than guys who like to sit and watch the game together or you know stuff like that. It's a great activity, and you guys will have a blast. You absolutely will. Yeah, see, Daggerfield, you say all the math, but with D&D, that's like math light. Now, if you want intimidation through, if you want, if you want hardcore math in a game, Pathfinder, that's the one you want to go for, aka Mathfinder. That game, it's fun, but whew, you want to talk about rules and math. Yes, absolutely, John. Most of the best stories, whether it's by like something that was awesome or something that was hilarious, almost always comes from someone doing something they didn't mean to do. That's like 100% of the stories. Like 100% of my favorite stories usually come from. I shouldn't say 100%. 90% of my favorite stories come from someone being like, "Oh shit, I didn't mean to do that, but all right, we're sticking with it." And that's exactly what they did. They just we just went with it. So, yeah, just like don't be intimidated by it. Just go into it and have fun and mess up and just have fun with your friends. Like fuck, I mean, what else is there besides just have fun with your friends? Like fuck off, man. Like that's all there is. That's all there is. But yeah, cool. No, I'm glad we could help a little bit. So what the hell was I doing? Oh yeah, we were working on writing some stuff. Here's our world. I'm not going to recap everything. You can go back and watch the VOD. I already recapped stuff. I want to work on some shit. We're going to write some shit. We don't need to worry about the quick list. That's just a table of contents that gets filled in at the end. I want to talk about the territory generalities. I want to establish those things. So I've talked about it before, but for me, when I'm writing a region and I'm starting to create a homebrew area and a homebrew campaign, one of the important things for me is having sort of a general idea written down about what the atmosphere, what the landmarks, just all of the important things of that region. Have it written down. So that way, as you know, weeks and months drag on as I'm continuing to work on this and write and add new stuff, I have a consistent foundation to go back to. Because it's really easy to let the mind wander and take it in all kinds of different directions, and then suddenly 7 dungeons later you're like, somehow I ended up in the Underdark and that was not where this started off, and now I don't know how to tie it and keep everything together. Like, that's the last thing you want. When you're trying to write something, you want something to feel like a cohesive world. You want it to feel at least realistic enough that it follows its own logic internally. And so for me, one of the important parts of that is just having these things. The history, current ownership. Current ownership is in terms of, you know, who are the allies and who are the enemies within that region. Safe travel recommendations. I use that as a way to just sort of describe what hazards exist in the wilds, right? Because there's a lot of travel through dangerous areas. So if I have sort of a general idea of what those encounters are going to be like, then as I'm filling in all of the space, like all of this space that we see here, right? Because we've got 2 cities here. So as I'm filling in all of this space with stuff, I want to keep it consistent, right? We don't want to have like, we don't want to be in the region that if we look at our world map here, right? So we're working in this hex. We don't want to be working in this like Goldenwind Plains area and suddenly talk about some sort of ice yeti that would actually, be more likely to be up over in here, right? We don't want to do that. That's it can add some fun flavor in some senses, but for the most part, it just kind of takes players out of that cohesive feeling of like I say, internal logic. And it can be pretty distracting. Especially if your players are like any of my players in any of my campaigns where they're super inquisitive and they're like, why is this thing here? It's like, fuck, I don't know, because it was the right challenge rating. Like, you want to avoid those as much as possible. Same with the magic and oddities. Yeah, exactly, Pike. It still has to make sense. You want things, like I say, it's obviously it's a fantasy world, so things are going to be a little nonsensical, but within its own confines, you want it to follow its own logic. Like for me, you'll hear me. I love watching movies and TV and analyzing the story and stuff like that, and video games too. Love analyzing things and just sort of the mechanics and tropes that go into it. And one of my biggest pet peeves is when things break their own logic, when things break their own rules. That's something that consistently pisses me off. Like if I'm playing a game and it's like, oh, here's the ice gun, you use that against the water monsters to freeze them, and then you get to the boss of the water monsters and the ice gun doesn't work, and it's like, oh, we gotcha. It's like, that shit pisses me off. It's like, you just spent 5 hours teaching me that this works, and now it doesn't work. Like, you're breaking your own rules. I hate that, and so I do my best to avoid that within my worlds, because I don't want to make my players suffer through that shit. So that's just a long-winded explanation of why these territory generalities, while they're kind of boring and tedious to get through, are extremely important when I'm writing something. So we can get rid of just the reminder to myself of what the hell I'm doing here. So the history. So this area here. So let's think about the history of what this area is going to be. So I'm really starting this from scratch. I really am starting this from scratch. I have not spent a lot of time thinking about this whole region of the world. I have spent a lot of my time kind of down here. Like in the past with writing, I've done a lot of things down here, and I've done a lot of things over in here. So this area is something that I haven't actually thought a lot about, which is part of the reason why I ended up liking this area. Mostly we chose this area because of the diverse set of landscapes and stuff for us to do. But it's also a fun, challenging thing. Like a fun writing challenge for me, and I thought that would be good to demonstrate, because if people are curious about how I go about writing stuff, like what better way to do it than starting from scratch, right? If I already have something figured out in the writing process, then you're not actually witnessing the writing process there. Um, yeah, the monsters know what they're doing. I haven't read it, but I've heard about it, and I hear that I hear good praise for it, Pika. Where like, and that's something that I try to do too. I try to make sure that my monsters have a reason for why they exist in an area, and I try to make sure that they're not just like stupid like fodder that will run into your sword. I try to have some sort of cohesion, some sort of consistency. Specifically, like especially when I'm doing actual missions, but even for the wandering encounters, like we'll work on later. I want it to feel like players are in a consistent existing area. I don't want them to feel like they're just wandering around and encountering random things. Like if that's all we're doing, then forget the campaign. Let's just get a random dungeon generator and go for it. What do you start with when world building or story building in your world? So it's hard to say what I start with when it's like completely brand new for an entire world, because the fact is, this world right here, this is my world. I have been working on this world for years. So I first came up with this world a long time ago. And I think probably what it is if I'm kind of thinking about how this whole world of, as I call it, Zaoria, where it came from, is it's really a collection of a lot of other small ideas that I have had over the years. And so for me, I guess one of the biggest things that I start with is I imagine an environment. I imagine like a cool location that would be fun to explore. So I think about like, what if there was like a castle that was made of ice, and it was like all up along in this sort of northern ice shelf. Like how cool would that be? What kind of, and from there it kind of blossoms. It's like, what kind of monsters would be there? What kind of villain would make a lair there? Why would they have a castle there? Why would that be there? And I start thinking about all those things, because what really got me into world building, I was actually a world builder as a hobby before I played D&D. And what got me into that is just sort of this fascination with forgotten ancient societies and buildings, and just sort of like these, like things like what exists within the pyramids, ancient tombs, things like that. Those types of ideas fascinate me, to think about what existed in a time that we can't even remember. And so I would always be coming up with cool ideas of like, oh, well, what if this world existed? Like, what would lead to have created this? How would they have survived? What would have been the death of this civilization, or things like that? And so I had just sort of like, as in high school, I just sort of started as little creative writing projects. I would write down little bits of details about like worlds. I would like write short stories about worlds or about places. And eventually it came to be that I had all this collection of stuff, and I was like, what if there was just this world that existed that like humans found, and it originally came from like a sci-fi perspective of like, what if we landed on this planet that had all this ancient like civilization that existed, but there was nothing, there was no living creatures left, like very Prometheus, very really, it's such a common trope. I can't claim that idea as an original thing at all. More so it's just like putting my own details to a very common trope of an abandoned, forgotten civilization. The Protheans in Mass Effect, all that kind of stuff. You see it all over the place in Star Wars. I'm forgetting the name of the one temple, but it's like where Luke goes off and starts his own school, because it's like this ancient temple for the Jedis and stuff like that. Like, those types of ideas fascinated me, and so I would always just write these short stories, and eventually I created this world, and I just sort of started putting them in. So I have this general idea, like there's all kinds of seeds. A lot of these places exist because there's a seed of an idea that I had at one point in time, and I can just remember those pretty clearly. And so that's kind of where this world was born from. But then when we get to now the D&D aspect of it, of where do I start from there, I guess I would say I start from one of those seeds. So in here, we have that seed. What if there was, so we have within this world, because it is a world that's like a post-calamity world where there's all kinds of, like the world is largely dangerous, but there are a few safe hold cities that are around here. And so, like, it's a lot of what I build is sort of, or a lot of what I write is sort of the process of exploring and reclaiming those forgotten areas. And so that's kind of where this one comes from. So this one comes from the idea that if we're working in this hex here. Here, I'll zoom in a little bit here. Oops, I gotta remember which button is which. All right, so we'll zoom in. We're working on this area right here, right? And so the idea comes from, well, we've got the established trade route that basically was just every city connected itself to the closest city in the process, just because that was the easiest way that would have been the easiest way for them to keep it safe, is just short distance traveled as possible. Right, because a lot of these highways existed pre-Calamity. They just kind of got a little bit more dangerous, but you keep guards with it. This is a short pathway. But now that things are starting to be reclaimed, they're getting better at surviving in the wilds, things are calming down after the Calamity, now they want a trade route that goes down here. It's a very natural thing. This cuts off days of travel for trading with not only down there, but then eventually all of this land over here. So it makes perfect sense that they would want to establish that. And so that's kind of what the idea is here. This is a region where they've set up a little village right here, so that the workers, the people that are trying to establish a new safe pathway down, have a place to retreat to if need be, and they're just painstakingly working their way through this part of the wilds, avoiding the most dangerous areas where there's big monster lairs, where there's, terrors in reality and stuff like that, which is sort of what the Calamity, or the Unhinging as I call it, was all about. They're trying to establish a trade route. And so that's kind of where it comes from. It comes from just like a generalized idea of what would be an interesting thing for players to explore, right? And so the idea is it would be interesting for players to be working through, with some NPCs, a very dangerous area to establish a way to get to safe areas. And in the process, they would discover all of these very dangerous places, forgotten places. We have mountains here, which would have historically had a lot of dwarves, but the dwarven cities were have been some of the hardest to reclaim, and so this whole area is still left to the wilds. There's no civilization in these mountains, and we have forest up here, which of course would be naturally very dangerous as well. A lot of big nasty baddies can make homes in the forests. Pretty easy for them to hide out and gain power in there. So, like this area would be a whole lot of interesting areas. And so as I'm going along, what I'll end up doing is I'll end up coming up with different mission ideas, and I'll be like, what if this thing existed in this world? How would that turn into a mission? What would that look like for players to do? And it just kind of turns into this process of building environments that are fun for players to explore, but also exist for a reason, specifically exist for some sort of evil or villain to be doing something there, which is what provides us with the game mechanics we need for D&D. So that's, I don't know, that's much more of an answer than you're probably looking for there, Dagger. But it's like, I guess really the upshot is, it's hard to say what the starting point is for me, because it mostly is just an idea that then things kind of fall into place. One thing that helps me is I've made for myself a lot of different sort of consistency guidelines and templates to work with and fill out, right, based on what I'm trying to make, whether I'm making a dungeon, a shop, a mission, whatever it is. I have these templates where I kind of turn it into a fill in the blank. So I remember all of the parts to fill in, and it helps me remember what the bones of everything, as well as all the flesh and the meat and potatoes of what it should be. Oh yeah. So okay, I'm glad it's helpful. Yeah, I think more people should do more creative writing, or just creative endeavors in general. I think that a lot of times we get caught up in the real world of having to, pay the bills and stuff, when we forget that, the human brain loves to create. It loves to imagine things. And so I think it's awesome. I mean, I'm with you. And that's been one of my favorite things about streaming the writing process, is that, I don't always even get a whole lot of writing done, because it'll turn into idea sharing processes. And I'm just noticing the music has decided that it's like there's no music happening. Hold on, I'm gonna get a new song going. Maybe it's just my volume's too low, but yeesh. But yeah, no, that's been one of my favorite things, is like being able to share ideas and discuss ideas with people, because I think some of the best ideas come from sharing thoughts and sharing ideas, and I also think it helps to rein me in a little bit if I get going on a tangent and some people are like, well, what if you did this, right? It pulls me in. It's why solo projects for like musicians are always way off the rails compared to like the amazing stuff they do in their band, right? Because having multiple creatives working on something help keep it you know, in sort of a realm of more, I don't want to say mainstream, more approachable ideas to wider ranges of people. And that's a really important thing for a game like D&D, because there's going to be multiple people playing it. So so yeah, so like we can talk about it too. So like yeah. So thanks, Dagger. Yeah, I like that idea. Because I try to consider my world like a living world. I try to have it be something that whether players choose to engage with things or not, things will still happen. And so it's like, in that way, even not making a choice is a choice, and it will have consequences. So it's like, one way or another, these people are trying to build this safe route. And so if they choose not to help them, that's fine. But there's probably going to be consequences. At some point in time, they're going to return to the city, and they're probably going to be in a situation where there's a lot more dead people because, you know, they ran into a danger and they didn't have as much protection and stuff like that. And so having sort of like the world going about projects regardless of what the players are doing is a very valuable concept to me. It's an important part of the game. It adds depth to it, because I think it you know, we're talking about consistency and sort of immersion for players. I think it ruins the immersion if everything just waits for the players to interact with it. You know, there's a place for those types of games, but it's not the game I like to run. So thinking about the history of this, you know, we can kind of go on and actually do sort of what I was talking about here. So thinking about the history of this, the history of this area in here, like I say, within this, this is the High Doom Mountains right here. This is the mountain range here. The High Doom Mountains and the Siskiyou Forest would have some history, but the Goldenwind Plains, historically speaking, actually was not particularly inhabited within the world. Like this was very sort of golden plains that was left untouched. Like you can think a lot about like the African bush. Is sort of the idea of what this area was, where it's like you have sort of on the outskirts here where it turns into more temperate environments. There were villages and stuff, and that's where Mofafetting comes from. This is one of the larger cities, one of the villages that was able to defend itself during the unhinging. But this region itself largely remained, you know, remained just wildlife. You know, there's dotted villages all around, but not a whole lot going on there. It was really left to the plains animals and stuff like that. You know, if there's any society, I always sort of figured, and this is something I haven't really fleshed out, and we might be able to explore it in here, in this little pocket here, but if there's any sort of society around here, I think it would be, originally I would have said Tabaxi, but now they have, you know, they just released the Leonins, which kind of fit the role perfectly, because I always imagined it'd be kind of interesting if there was like sort of like an Aslan sort of race that sort of became more human based on gifts from the gods and stuff like that, that sort of lived here and guarded the plains. You know, them along with maybe some of the Aarakocra that would live over here. They were sort of like guardians of the wildlife around in this area. It's sort of how I always imagined the Goldwind Plains going. So we can maybe incorporate some of that in there, but honestly, even that's a struggle for me to think of, because they would be, the Leonins would be more around maybe here and around this bank of this lake, or along these rivers. They would be more so deeply embedded in the plains, because up in the mountains again we have like the Aarakocra, who would have their refuges like up around in like the higher peaks and stuff, and within the mountains you have the dwarves, and it's not like they would be at war, but it's like this would be the dwarf territory. And if we're looking at this region right here, that's getting really close there. And then with the forest going there, you might have a little bit of like elven society going, you know, drifting towards those borders. But even that would be a stretch, because the dwarves would just have such a claim to this. No one besides the dwarves really claims the mountains. Not the same as them. I mean, you might have some gnomes and stuff like that in there, but you know, when it comes to just like pure territory ownership, I mean, they've got it. And so with this region here, we can maybe have some societies of Leonins peeking in from there, maybe some elves peeking in over there, and that would add some interesting variety in abandoned households that players could explore. But yeah, so it's interesting to think about, because really up in here there wouldn't be a whole lot of culture. There might be some outskirts dwarven societies up in here, but even then the dwarves would more so be in there. So Haven't heard of. Oh, I assume you're talking about the Leonins Pika. Yeah, they were just recently dropped along with the satyrs, the Mr. Tumnuses of the D&D world. They yeah, absolutely, Daggerfear. It could absolutely be sort of an intersection with that, with all of them too. Which actually, I'm not opposed to, like I say, sort of having sort of abandoned places that players could explore that would have traces of all of those races. And I think that's kind of more so where it would be, in that, like, along the outskirts here, a little bit there, and along the outskirts there would be the different races and stuff, because this whole area would have been completely abandoned during the unhinging. Anything in the mountains, the mountains would obviously have been a very nasty hotbed for a lot of very nasty monstrosities that would have come about from such a calamity. So the unhinging was basically, if you imagine all of the different layers of the realms, like the mortal plane, the philosophicals, or like Mount Celestia, the nine hells, all that kind of stuff, and the elemental planes. Like, if you imagine all of those as being like existing in a jar that are sort of like different layers of like sand and water and oil and stuff like that kind of layers off. So it's like they kind of interact, but they're their own separate things. Imagine the unhinging is like if someone took that jar and just shook it up so that everything got all kinds of mixed. No one really knows why it happened, it just happened. And so everything went kind of crazy, and the mortal realm kind of took the brunt of it, just because the mortal realm is the least equipped to handle any of the other realms because of just how crazy and magical they get. And so most areas turned into really big hotbeds of just danger. And this area would have definitely been one of those, with such diverse landscapes and potentialities there. Hold on. No, okay, I thought I heard a knock. Not good is a very good. Not good is a good description of the situation for sure, Dagger. But yeah, so like this area was completely abandoned. Most of the people that lived in here would have fled up along this temperate area to this pathway that would eventually lead up to Fossvik up here. So Fossvik is a hotbed, and it's got a diverse set of races, because there would have been a lot of elves, a lot of dwarves, and a lot of again, like the Leonins and stuff that would have fled to this area. Aarakocra, they were kind of removed enough, and they're rough and tumble enough that they actually didn't get bothered by it a whole lot. So Fossvik is a very diverse city up there, but around in here, there's nothing. There's absolutely nothing, and that's why it's such a process to reclaim it, right? And that's why this is all going down here. So I guess that kind of gives us our history, at least the important parts of the history here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to write a little blurb about this. And it doesn't have to be long, just like a paragraph, just something to recenter my thoughts when I'm trying to create new things. If I'm like, what would make sense to what would be sensible to have in this area? If I'm trying to create a dungeon, what kind of dungeon would exist in this area? If I have that generalized history of like knowing what exists, or at least what historically has existed in this area, that gives me sort of my that gives me a trajectory, a place to go. Did anything from those other realms seep into the world? Yes. A whole lot of it did, and that's why everything's like mucked up. And within my lore, that's why your nasty ass monstrosities here. If we go up in here, and we just kind of come up into our monsters, and we just go ahead and most particularly get our nasty, horrid monstrosities. Like, look at that fucker. You're gonna try and tell me that exists in the mortal world? Forget about it. No, this thing is like some weird amalgamation monstrosity between a person and some monster from the water elemental plane or something like that, right? Like, what about this little, the basilisks and stuff like that? Like, that's gonna be some sort of horrid creature that was like, maybe started off as an iguana, but then the nine hells just sort of seeped into its blood, and now we've got those things. So that's kind of the idea about it, is like it kind of created, like the interaction created a lot of these creatures. Plus, then all of these other creatures, aberrations, kind of the same concept for, he's there, he's just everywhere, he's everywhere. Although it's actually because I also still have the monstrosities there. But so our aberrations, things like this, would have been a creature from one of the other, probably from the nine hells or whatever, but it's like, that's kind of, so some things were they just came from that realm, and some things are direct results of the interaction between those, because there's like tears in the world, and so some things just come through the tears, and some things that exist in the mortal realm are just like warped and twisted by the magic coming out from the tears. Hey, Fledgling Gamer, how's it going? Glad to see you here. But yeah, so yes, a whole lot of stuff came into the mortal world, and it's kind of messed up, and it's like plenty of the stuff from the mortal realm would have gotten trapped into the elemental planes and all the other planes, but most mortal creatures would have got fucked up pretty quick. Can you imagine a human getting thrust into the fire plane? It's game over. It's game over at that point in time. So the other realms were largely unaffected, other than just like the confusing combinations of everything. It's just monsters and intelligence that came from those realms. So in a sense, yes, but the way that I have my lore is, if it's a playable race, I have them sort of classified within this world. I call them enlightened races, and those are races that existed prior to the unhinging. They existed prior to that, and came to be largely, most of them would have had history as having been created, so to speak, either through natural means within the mortal plane, or through intentional actions by gods and deities and whatnot. Is sort of how they would have come from. So there are some that would have influences, but largely speaking, if it's a sentient, intelligent creature, it probably existed before the unhinging, because the other thing of the unhinging is most of the creatures that were displaced are largely insane because of being ripped from their plane of existence and thrown into another one, and that sort of explains the inherent violence coming from most of those creatures. Okay, what do you got, Gamer here? Fledgling Gamer. Wow, sounds like you were having a good time there, Fledgling Gamer. That sounds like a hell of a character for sure. But yeah, so that's kind of how the races work and how they differentiate. Like, there are plenty of intelligent creatures that come from there, but they're unlikely to have societies beyond just like little tribes of light creatures, because their sanity has largely been pretty it's been damaged. Their sanity has. So that's kind of the nature of it. But I intentionally leave it vague, so that way as I'm writing things and coming up with ideas, I have the freedom to sort of alter the lore and alter histories of things as fits whatever fun idea I have for a game, right? So that way I can make sure that as long as I'm creating something for my players, I can make sure I have sort of the freedom and the wiggle room to make something that's a compelling story for them. So I intentionally leave it kind of vague in general. But, man, I am struggle bussing with my lemonade here. I keep dribbling. You know what, Fledgling, I understand, but I'm gonna stick with just working on my writing and stuff like that. Because I'm working on a long-term project here, so I wanna try and kind of keep some cohesion going on here. But it does sound like an interesting thing. I might have to check it out after the stream at some point in time. Let's see here. So yeah, so talking about the history of this area, so kind of like we started talking about, let's see here, prior to the unhinging, I'm gonna go ahead and lean into what you were talking about, Dagger, where it's like kind of an interesting interaction between all of them. I'm gonna lean into that a little bit as I'm writing this, because I like that idea. I think that's a good one. And it kind of builds in that reason that you might need for why players would encounter such diverse stuff while they're here. So prior to the unhinging, wow, if only I could actually type today. Unhinging. Prior to the unhinging, this region served as a sort of crossroads between multiple different races from multiple different walks of life. I've been using my cat. She's right here next to me, sleeping in her little bed. Been using her as my alarm system for if someone knocks on the door, because I know that she'll like freak out and look at the door. So every time she looks up, I look to see if she's looking at the door or out the window to know whether or not I need to go let the maintenance crew in. Let's see here. So multiple different races from multiple different walks of life. Let's see here. We'll say between the Leonins of the Golden Wind Plains, the dwarves and gnomes of the High Doom. Was it? I forget how I spelled it. I need to be consistent with myself. D-U-H-M. Okay, not D-H-U-M. D-U-H-M. I always forget. It's like the whole I before E or after E debacle. Like, how is anyone supposed to know? Dwarves and gnomes of the High Doom Mountains, and the elves of the Siski Forest. We'll say, I don't know, what's a good cap for that sentence here. See, now here's where the tough part gets, trying to, me, who's someone who's not an exceptionally good storyteller when it comes to just like straight up writing, like trying to build narrative sentences is always a challenge for me. Between the Leonins of the Golden Wind Plains, the dwarves and gnomes of the High Doom Mountains, and the elves of the Siski Forest, culture within this area always reflected great diversity. Additionally, we'll say, you know, it would actually make sense too if there was a lot of them. It would serve as a good place for like low-key trade between those three types of regions. Additionally, let's see here. I'm not even going to add the additionally. I'm going to try and keep it more narrative than that. They always reflected great diversity. Trade was strong, and many adventurers would visit the area for the chance to see cultures of all sorts, past and present. Boom, there we go, that gives us an idea. Let's see here, what do you got, Dagger? Story and perspective. Very active seeing these answers. Are they not all bad? Okay, so here's Dagger. Here's where the hilarity of my groups comes into play. So when I'm writing them, yes, I do my very best to make sure that monsters have, like, at least like the big baddies, have some sort of redeeming quality, or at least some sort of humanity about them, some sort of reason for what they're doing beyond the, I'm the bad guy, of course I'm trying to destroy the world. Like, I try to give them depth. I always try to do that. My players don't give a fuck. My players are always just the most absurd murder hobos you have ever seen, no matter what I do. And I let them do that. You know, the game is, you know, it's our game, it's not my game. So if that's the way they want to play it, that's fine, and I'm totally willing to just, like, do that, and like, it just, in my mind, it still makes sense, because they just kind of become the villains, and whatever villains I am, I just try to have them survive as the heroes within their own story, and it still kind of works out. But my intent is always to have it be written in a way that, yes, there's a lot of there's a lot more cerebral stuff going on, so players that are interested in that can have fun with it. But my players are they're kind of violent, and they kind of just like to kill things. So, they shared their knowledge and their skills, and normally wouldn't share it. Yeah, like, that's something that could be in there. Although, like, that one is almost something that, like, that's almost more, that concept would be more relevant actually up here in Fosvik, where the races in the modern times are currently interacting. You know, what would they share versus what would they sort of sequester to their own corners of the city, their own little, like, Leonin quarters or whatever. Because within the within this area, because everything's abandoned, it'll largely be pretty isolated. Like there might be a few villages all along these outskirts of Leonins that are pretty much all Leonin stuff, and like then here would be all dwarven tunnels, and here it would all be elven tree houses and stuff like that. But actually, what would be interesting though is to see, like, there might be some dwarven artifacts. Like they might find dwarven axes, within the forest villages, because those were the best axes that they could find, and they would use those for for building stuff like that. We use those for weapons. Or in here, maybe there would be a lot of like elven medicines that they would import, because they just don't have like herbs and everything that they would need for that kind of stuff here in the High Doom Mountains, right? Or in the Leonins, maybe they would find, there would be, again, like the different dwarven stuff like that, or in the dwarven ones, maybe there'd be Leonin artifacts. So, like, it would be interesting to have some sort of crossover there, and that would be kind of fun for players to interact with. And that's a good one that does resonate with my players, because the only thing they like, maybe as much as murdering random unsuspecting monsters, is they love stealing things. Regardless, really, of if it's treasure that's up for the grabs or stuff that a shopkeeper is asking money for, they just like to have things. They're kind of kleptomaniacs, and so it'd be fun to, it would be really fun to have just sort of like random things, like they find like some sort of like elven blade in the Dwarven Mountains, and they're like, huh, did not expect to find that there, and that'd be kind of a fun treasure hunting thing for them. Which is why this is really going to be a fun region to write, because I like, there's just all kinds of potential for that kind of stuff, as long as I don't lean too heavy into it and have like every dwarven dungeon have like 7 elven artifacts. It's like, okay, well, that's dumb. But it's like if they find a tomb of a king and like his sword is of elven make, right? And it's like, oh, that's really interesting that this king would have that, but it would be like a really amazingly powerful sword. So stuff like that would be really interesting, and I feel like we can kind of establish that within here. And by saying trade was strong, by having that little blurb in there, we open up the possibility for that, right? So it's like, I'm setting, it's like when I'm doing these histories, really what I'm doing is I'm planting seeds, but also setting constraints for myself. So that way this can be like a fun challenge for me too while I'm going. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. Every game has that one guy who, regardless of what he sets out to make his character, just wants to smash things. Every group has that. Both of my groups have all of them be like that, which, again, for me, I'm like, hey man, whatever floats your guys' boat, we can just destroy things and find treasure for 5 hours, then we can eat pizza and watch a stupid movie. It's like, and it's a great time, and that's why, going all the way back to what we were talking about for Revelator there and tips for starting out. That's why I always say, especially for your first group, don't try to find a random group online that's like hiring out a player or something like that. Start with your friends. Start with a group of friends, because then no matter what the game ends up being, you have fun anyway. Because like for me, the thing that's fun about it too is I lean into it, and like I recognize that they do that, and I give them shit for it endlessly. Like a good example, they recently found a child who was lost at sea, near dead on a raft, and the first thing they did was suspiciously interrogate the child. Like they tied up the child and threatened to leave the child on a stranded desert island. And so I've been leaning into that and calling them child murderers for most of the time since that happened. You make your own fun with it, but you're not wrong. It's very common, and I think a lot of it comes from the fact that it's exciting, right? It's exciting to get into a battle and to fight evil monsters and claim treasure for it. Like there's sort of like this visceral innate desire that we all have for that on different levels, and D&D is a really good way to explore that that desire to roughhouse without actually having to put yourself in any sort of real peril. Because it's like the worst thing that happens is your character dies, and either you can be resurrected in the world of D&D, or you make a new one and you just keep going with it, right? So I never am too surprised by that. At least as a general idea. Sometimes, like when players threaten to abandon a child on a desert island, sometimes I'm a little surprised by that level of callousness, but just as a general thing, I don't find it too surprising when players do that. Exactly. Yeah, D&D. I mean, just the nature of it being a magical world. That's a much more violent and aggressive and dangerous world. Morals are different within the world of D&D, and I think a lot of players, even if they're not intentionally doing it, just by doing things they wouldn't do in real life, they explore that and they play that. And for some people, that's as good as philosophical debate gets for them, right? Like that's the most that they're going to do for it, because they're just not a cerebral person that will think about that, but they explore it through the activity of, do I stab or do I talk? You should write children's books. Good God. Good God. If any of them told me to do that, I would tell them to stop. I don't know. I was going to come up with something a bit more vitriolic than that, but truth be told, I would just say, don't guys, don't write a kid's book. You'd be bad at it. Don't do it. Actually, you know what? I would take that back. I rescind that. I'm actually with you, Pike. If they should write a children's book, because I would love to see the fallout from that. I would love to see the backlash of them trying to write a kid's book, and anyone who ever reads it kind of looking at them like, no, not a kid's book. Not a kid's book. What the fuck was I doing here? Oh yeah, we're writing history. Let's see here. But when the unhinging happened, I already know exactly what I'm doing for the next paragraph here, but when the unhinging happened, this marriage of many cultures and creatures was this region's, where is it, region's undoing. The wide range, let's see, it was this region's undoing, creatures of unimaginable horror, of all different types, came to be over the course of a single day. Monsters, let's see here, we'll say creatures flooded the valley from the forest and the mountains, demonstrating yeesh. Homework hasn't reached out to them yet. Surprisingly, no. Probably just because we don't stream our games. If we did, then we'd probably have a deal immediately. Oh man, hey, you know what? And I gotta agree with you there, Dagger. I do appreciate my players interrogating a fake child as opposed to a real one that they find near dead on the streets. I gotta agree with you there. That is a better scenario. There's a better scenario. Let's see. Creatures flooded the valley from the forest and the mountains, demonstrating. I don't want the word demonstrating there. That doesn't flow. Creatures flooded the valley from the forest and the mountains. Let's see here. Horrid mutations of innocent plains creatures found new homes in the dwarven tunnels and elven tree villages. All in all, no, I don't want to say that. The region, let's see here, we'll say, along with the rest of the world, any no, that's not a word. Any ability to survive vanished from the region. Boom. We'll do that. Make their horribly violent, nonsensical things as like the quotes. I'm trying to think about like some particularly good one-liners any of my players have had. I can't think of any, but it's probably because I was just so I'm getting back. The reason it's been so long since I've written, I'm just getting back from. I was at a kickboxing tournament with a bunch of people from my Muay Thai gym, and all that's on my mind is the immeasurable number of one-liners from those guys on that trip. There are some good stuff. There's some good stuff that comes from guys who are loopy from cutting weight, as well as guys who are drinking heavily because they just finished the tournament for which they were cutting weight for. You get some goofy lines coming from those guys. It's oh man, and that's filling up all of my humor cells in my brain there. But I know my players have definitely said a lot of ridiculous stuff. I should write them down. I should write them down for later. Dissemination to the world, because there's some funny stuff that comes from those guys. Because my players, they like, I can't because of my job. I'm required by my employer to not do the whole getting high thing. But they love themselves some Mary Jane, and I don't blame them. Like, I would, like, yeah, why shouldn't they? They're allowed to. It's legal where I am, so like, why shouldn't they enjoy it? But they get loopy after, when we get to the closing hour, it's the bottom of the ninth, they get loopy, and there's some funny stuff that comes from those guys. It's good stuff. Actually, I'm gonna just do one little thing today. Today the area has quieted from the past ways of constant territorial strife between the monsters of the land. Let's see here. Territories have been established, and the kings have peace in their respective kingdoms. Using that as sort of like a catch you later, Pike. Glad you stopped by. I'm glad to see you. Glad you were part of the discussions. It's been fun discussions today. I've been enjoying this today. So, and I'm glad you were part of that. I appreciate you, and I can't wait to see you next time. So let's see here. So yeah, territories have been established, and the kings have peace in their respective kingdoms. As the world slowly quiets and heals from the Actually, I'm just going to say, as the world slowly heals from the unhinging, more opportunities for this is a word, right? Reclamation? Reclamation? That's got to be a word, right? Yeah, reclamation. I just spelled it wrong. Okay. Let's see, more opportunities for reclamation present themselves. We only need one P there. Present themselves. Though far from safe, the region has pockets of hope as much as it has pockets of horror. I don't know, that's like really cliched, not actually very good writing, but it establishes what I need. It gives me my baseline of what I need there. So we're gonna keep it good there. Let's see here. So okay, what time is it? I gotta be paying attention to time. Oh, I got time. I got time, baby. I got time. I got at least a half hour before I gotta go do other stuff. We're good. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, that probably means I have a half hour until I have to worry about maintenance possibly showing up, because they're probably on lunch as well. So, hot diggity ding dong damn, that's great news. Watch, I just said that, and now they're going to come knocking on the door like right now. You know it's going to happen. Okay, territory ownership. So this is something that we're going to add more to later. because this is meant to sort of encompass and be a place for me to talk about both allies and enemies, right? So I always have like at least one, usually multiple, sort of like big bads that exist within this region. So that way there's options for players to sort of choose. Because I like to try and make things kind of like a sandbox approach, where it's like players can choose what threads they pursue. And I like to have there be solid payoff regardless of what one they choose. So I always have a couple different bads, and I always sort of explain, what sort of influence they have on the region, how powerful they are, yada yada yada, who their minions and underlings are, along with also talking about who the allies are. And so in this case, so when we're talking about current ownership, in this case, how do I want to say this? I'm going to say this area is still largely beholden to the ways of the wilds. That's how they refer to it in my world, is like all of the unprotected cities, or sorry, all of the area that isn't a protected city is called the wilds. That's just kind of what they call it, because it's dangerous and you don't really go there. Like the only people that go into the wilds are those who accept the fact that there's, like, on a good day, there's a kind of a coin toss on whether or not they'll be able to come home. It's real 50-50 out there. This is a dangerous place. This is bad news. So this area is still largely beholden to the ways of the wilds. An excursion. Wow, that is butchering of the word excursion. Excursion has. I don't want to say an excursion. An effort has. No, it's not in past tense. It's like present tense. It's still happening. An effort is being made to establish a new trade route between Fosvik and Mofefeting. However, this excursion is slow and deliberate, as the spearhead works slowly to find the safest route between monsters and tears alike. Within the world, they just kind of call them tears. Those are the tears between different planes, like I mentioned. In an effort to I don't know, how do I want to say this? A small village has been established, nestled in the crook of land between a large lake and the feet of the High Doom Mountains, in order to serve as a trade outpost and refuge for those working on finding this safe path. This village, which I both love and regret the name that I gave to this stupid place. Boom, Novotroy Kladny. For some reason, I thought it would be funny to make the name really hard to pronounce. Not really thinking about the fact that, yes, it'll be funny to watch my players struggle with that name, but before that happens, I will be spending months trying to say that name because it is the centralmost city of this region. So I'm already committed. I'm sticking to it. I've planted my flag on this hill, and I will die here. But do yourself a favor and don't be me. Don't be the same smartass that I am. Luckily, I've already written it up here, so I can just easily copy and paste it. Let's see here. This village of Novotroykladny. I'm getting better at saying it though. So there we go. Is a very diverse place. Dwarves, elves, gnomes, and even Leonins make up equal portions of the population, as all of these races have nearby ancestral homes they wish to try to reclaim. As this trade route is slowly built. And actually, here's a really good example of something that I say for anyone who's looking for tips on how to create worlds and make their own homebrew stuff. One thing that I always say is but I can't take credit for this because many good writers, actors, musicians, what have you, would say the same thing, and it's something that I hear echoed from a lot of creatives that I take to heart. One thing that I strongly, firmly believe is that inspiration doesn't beget creation. Creation begets inspiration. And so what that means is you can't just wait for yourself to have a brilliant idea and know exactly what you're going to write to do it. You have to sit down and you have to start the process, because that's what will get your brain going, and that's where ideas come from, because you can always edit things later, right? Like, that's most of what writing is. You get a rough idea down and then you edit as it goes. But once you start working on things, like even if you decide you want to change them, by getting into that frame of mind where you're creating something and working on something, that's where more ideas come from. Case in point, what I just wrote here. Dwarves, elves, gnomes, and even Leonins make up equal portions of the population, as all of these races have nearby ancestral homes they wish to try to reclaim as this trade route is slowly built. That right there is just a deep well of mission ideas for this area. We've got 4 branches of campaign that players can take. Well, 5 really. 5 branches of campaign that players can undertake. They can help with the trade route building process, or they can find people, find offshoots, find branching missions and excursions of dwarves, elves, gnomes, or Leonins that are looking for assistance in helping to reclaim this, that, or the other village that they know once belonged to their ancestors and they wish to take them back. So right there, by just taking the time to write out this stuff, I've given myself a whole bunch of good ideas. So case in point, if you want to start writing but always find yourself sitting there not sure what to do, write down anything. Write down anything. Because as soon as you've written down a sentence, you can look at that sentence and say, do I like this one or do I make it better? And if you say you like this one, it's like, great, I'll make more sentences like this. Or if you say, I don't like this one, then either you edit it or you make a new sentence that you do like. And you just kind of keep doing that. And then eventually you'll have written something. And maybe you've given yourself more ideas. Maybe you start off with an idea for a character and you're like, I have an idea for a character of this book that I want to write, but I don't really know what the story would be. Start writing a bio for the character, because then suddenly what you'll say is like, if you're writing, it's like, oh, this character was, he wanted to be an artist, but he was conscripted and had to go to war, and so like it's a guy who is very against violence and wants to do this and has to do this. Well, suddenly there's your story. There's your story right there, right? You've just given yourself the idea for the story. How would someone who doesn't want to go to war would handle going to war? It's a story been written many times. It's an interesting concept to explore. So the upshot here is just, I've been saying upshot a lot today. I don't know. Sorry, I just noticed that, and I don't know if I'm okay with it or not. Mostly because I like to have diversity in the words that I say. But the big point here is, don't wait to have don't wait to have the final product in mind to start writing. Start writing as soon as you have the idea, and the final product will come. Right? That's what the process is. So just, you know, little fun lesson for y'all. So there we go. So here's our current ownership, and that kind of gives me what I have at the moment. I'm going to add some information about what the big bads are and stuff like that, but I'm not there yet. And again, we can always edit things and change things as we go along, which is exactly what I'm going to do here. We'll come back to this. And we'll get some interesting stuff going on. But for now, I'm going to leave that. Safe travel recommendations. Okay, so the safest place in this region is by far the Golden Wind Plains. Certainly the plains are filled with dangers, both sentient and inanimate, but with the nature of the plains being such that one can see along the flat land for miles, it is easy to see dangers before you encounter them. Simple survival knowledge and equipment is likely enough, so long as adventurers are attentive and careful during travel. The mountain, let's see, we'll go ahead and be clear here. The High Doom Mountains and Siski Forest are different stories. The abandoned dwarven tunnels of the mountain. Whoops. Wow. Okay, first off, we're going to get rid of the duplicate word. Second off, we're going to let the computer handle mountain for me because clearly I can't. The abandoned dwarven tunnels of the mountains are now home to countless nasty creatures. Many of these creatures hold connections to the hells, where dark enclosed spaces. Let's say actually connections to the hells. Connections to the hells, finding themselves gravitating towards the dark and enclosed tunnels that remind them of home. See? It's really actually quite sweet. It just reminds them of home. So it's gravitating towards the dark and enclosed tunnels that remind them of home. Even the mountain exteriors are home to many creatures of flying or giant persuasions. I know it is with an E, isn't it? You dummy. How did I get that wrong? Or giant persuasions. Let's see here. The only saving grace of the mountains are the Aarakocra Cochrane tribes that live among the peaks. Ensure no creature too violent or we'll say too violent or clever leaves the mountain range. Wow. Range among the peaks to and ensure no creature too violent leaves. Actually, what we're gonna say, leaves the tunnels without a good reason. Boom. There we go. All right. Let's see here. We're gonna say the Siski Forest is not a hike for the light-hearted. We'll say fey creatures and mortal creatures warped by the magics of the fey realms have made their homes here among the trees, finding the dark and mysterious woods to be a comfort among this strange mortal world. Boom. And I actually don't think there needs to be a whole lot beyond that. I think that, well, I guess what we'll say is, we'll say travelers are encouraged to avoid this place or seek out an Aarakocra guide if a visit is entirely unavoidable. Boom, there we go. Let's see here. While many of these creatures are content to leave alone those who leave them alone, just as many would be eager for the chance to kill an innocent traveler for any number of reasons. Travelers would do best to stick to the highway that runs through the forest, but those wishing to delve in among the trees may wish to consider an elven guide, as they would be best suited for navigating a safe path through the foreboding woods. Okay, I've got a few things. Okay, first off, we need to make that. Wow, it's got like everything. Okay, may wish to consider hiring Elven guide for foreboding woods. Wow, that's just. I'm a little embarrassed about how off I got about like how bad that display of typing ability was. A little awkward. Magic and oddities. So this one, so this is kind of similar, but rather than focusing on like the monsters, this is more so focusing on what types of tears between realms exist in this area and all that kind of stuff. Within the planes, there is comparatively little in the way of magical dangers when placed next to the list of creature dangers that exist. The odd tear still exists here and there. Oops, that's wrong here. Here and there. So the odd tear still exists here and there. But most are visible from far off and avoidable. The mountains, however, let's see here. The mountains, however, have served as a sort of stewing pot for the magical oddities that appeared during the unhinging. Tears, let's see, we'll say tears fill the ancient dwarven hallways with often leaving few, if any, alternative routes through. Boom. Let's see here. The forest is similarly. So the forest, let's say, actually I want to change that a little bit, because if we're going to have a lot of fey creatures that from around the world gravitate towards the forest, the way I want to say this is I think I'm going to describe it as like that the magic comes from the creatures who have made this sort of Fey World version 2.0. The forest is filled with magics of all schools due to the concentration of Fey creatures all around. Boom. Oh, look at you go, Revelator! You found yourself a DM. Everything worked out. You guys are some lucky sons of bitches. You make sure you thank that DM. You be nice to that DM. It is, at least within any game I've been part of, it is customary to bribe the DM with snacks and beverages. It's not necessary. I never require my players to, but they always shower me in snacks and beverages for all of the work I put in, and it is 100% appreciated, and it is a very good way to ensure that the DM is of a generous spirit when things such as potential character deaths come into play. But yeah, if you found someone who's going to take the time and teach you guys how to play, you cherish that. You cherish that, and you shower them in all the chips and candies that you can find, and they'll be super appreciative. And I'm guessing that the DM will probably be pretty stoked to be sort of with a group of friends that are excited to learn D&D. I know I'm always excited to teach new people to play. So congratulations, that's awesome. That's awesome. I'm glad you found someone. That's really good news. Saves you guys a lot of time, and actually it'll be a lot easier for you guys to learn the game a little bit when you don't have to worry about how the mechanics of the game work. So it's going to be really good for all of you. Well done, friend. Let's see, I want to finish this. I'm going to finish this paragraph, and then I got to probably take off for the day here. Forest filled with magics of all schools due to the concentration of fey creatures all around. From all around the world. Whoops, what did I do? Go back there. Yeah, okay. Gosh dang it. From all around the world. Boom, that's what we're looking for. Let's see here. Magical auras simply radiate from the trees and can impact travelers in unimaginable ways as they wander among the flora and fauna of the woods. Boom. Actually, I think that kind of does it. I think that gets me some really good stuff. This gives us a lot of really good background. And there's a good chance that I will start the next writing session kind of re-going through this and making small edits if I need to. Because it's always a constant process, but this gives me a lot of good ideas, and through the process of doing this, like I say, activity begets inspiration, and so by going through the process of doing all this stuff, I have a lot of fresh ideas for missions, for dungeons, for all kinds of stuff that I want to start filling this world with. So I'm feeling really good about this, guys. I'm excited about this. This has been fun. This has been a really fun session. I gotta say, I've really enjoyed the conversations, and I've really enjoyed how productive it's been. This is awesome. I'll just say it. I enjoy streaming the writing process. I enjoy it. Who would have goddamn thought, right? Like when I first did this, I was like, no one's gonna go for this. People are gonna think this is stupid. No one's gonna go for this. And people come in, and we have the coolest conversations. We have all kinds of awesome discussions about D&D, about how to create things, about different ideas people have. I love it. I love it. I love that I can be here to offer advice to people who are new to DMing or even just new to D&D in general. I really have fun with this. It seems like I might have accidentally tapped into a very small hole, in terms of D&D content that people were interested in seeing get filled. No innuendo intended. But this is fun. This is really cool. This is really cool, and like I say, who would have thought? Who would have thought? And I'm super appreciative to everyone who stops by and has the conversations, because it makes me, it makes this idea feel valid when you guys humor me. So, really good stuff. Really good stuff today. To everyone who watched, and to anyone who's watching the VOD, hopefully you enjoyed watching it, and hopefully you think about checking us out. If you can, next time when I'm live, because the more people discussing ideas, the merrier. Like I say, I think crowdsourcing ideas benefits all of us who are trying to create things for whatever our goals and missions are. So, good session today. Good session today. I'm so glad to be back. I had an awesome trip. And, if you want to hear stories from my trip, tune into especially my video game streams, because I do stream video gaming too. So if you catch me when I'm doing those, feel free to ask me about the stories from there, because I had an awesome vacation. But as awesome as that vacation was, I'm stoked to be back. This is a lot of fun. I love this. I missed doing this, and I'm all about it, man. I'm all about it. So, all right, I'll stop gushing. Not quite. I still have a little bit more gushing in me. That sounds dirty. I'm not going to say that again. But I gotta get going. But thank you to everyone who stopped by. Thank you for everyone who was here live, having the conversations, making this fun. Thank you again to my new followers for today, Revelator and Daggerfairn. Thank you guys. I appreciate that. I'm honored that you guys were entertained enough that you want to come back for more. I appreciate that. That means a lot to me. And I will hopefully keep providing interesting content for you. Anyone who's checking out the VODs, I appreciate you just as much too. It makes me feel good when I go back and look at past videos and see that more people have continued to watch and have shown an interest in this kind of stuff. That's very flattering to me, and I'm very honored by that. So to everyone watching in any way, shape, or form, I appreciate each and every one of you. Coming up the rest of this week, today's Wednesday, so tomorrow on Thursday, around this time, I will definitely be doing my Mass Effect stream that I've been working on. We've been going through Mass Effect. And then Friday afternoon, around this time, I will be doing my Friday writing stream. Saturday, there's a good chance I will be doing another Mass Effect stream, so long as nothing else comes up. Saturdays, a lot of times I play D&D on Saturdays, but we don't have a session planned for this Saturday because I've been away and I'm not presently prepped for any of my actual games. So this Saturday I will probably do another Mass Effect stream. And if you're also interested in just seeing me in a much loopier, less lucid state, you should check out. I tried it this morning and it was kind of fun. I do like to do morning or evening streams of. Right now I'm going through Far Cry, but just other video game streams. And the morning ones are fun because I wake up at 4 a.m. and it takes me about an hour to get the engine revving because I got to go and do my conditioning workouts that complement my my Muay Thai, kickboxing, and my rock climbing that I like to do. So I do my conditioning workouts in the morning. But it takes some time for me to get there, and so I find that just waking up with a video game is a good way to do it. But I'm not fully aware, so it's a good time. It's a good time. So feel free to stop by for any of those. Check out any of the VODs. I am humbled by any views I get in any way, shape, or form. I appreciate each and every one of you. And just the final thing, like I always try to say at the end of any of my streams, do me a favor and just you know, whatever you're doing for the rest of your day, try to do it in a way that makes the day good for the people around you. You know, try to be nice to the people around you. Try to be polite to the people around you. We live in a world where a lot of people are just, I mean, I'll just say it, a lot of people are dicks. And it would be a better world if we would all just try to not be like that. So just do me that favor and go out and try to be good to each other. But other than that, I don't got anything. I appreciate each and every one of you. If you guys go out into the world being as cool as you are while we're in the chat, then like fuck, man, you're gonna be fine. It's gonna be a good day for all of you guys. So yes, I thank and appreciate each and every one of you. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the next time I get to see you. So take care until then.